So, friends, welcome to our, can you believe it, 49th online gathering for congregational leaders across the country. This time is called Being Church, and it is sponsored by ELCA's Coaching Ministry. I'm Jill Beverlin. I am the National Coordinator of Coaching for the ELCA, and I'm one of your facilitators today. It's important for us to be reminded that this time is meant to be a safe and brave space for the people of our church to bring the truth of who they are and how they are doing. These conversations are an intentional step to live more fully into God's dream for us as the body of Christ. And so today we are happy to once again welcome our dear friend, the Reverend Solveig Nilsen-Goodin, into our speaking space. Solveig, the last time you were with us, we were just beginning our journey through Epiphany. And here we are again, wrapping up this season of the church year. That aspect of shining a light on things that have not received support, light, and love is so very important. And we're anxious to hear your teaching on this today. So Solveig, welcome to the room.
Thanks, Jill. Thanks so much. Thanks, Jason, and thanks, friends, for being here today again. Over these months, I'm now recognizing some familiar names and some familiar faces, and that's really fun and a real gift for me. And welcome to all of you who might be here for the first time or a second time when I've been on. So grateful to be with you again this month as we continue to explore this topic of grief. So for many of these sessions, I've been utilizing Francis Weller's 5 Gates of Grief that he named in his book, The Wild Edge of Sorrow. 5 gates that are just some of the many points through which grief enters our lives. The one we're exploring today can be one of the more tender of those gates, one of the most difficult to give voice to, and at least within the shame-based dominant cultural context of our country, I think, sadly, it's one of the most prevalent. This is the grief carried by the places that have not known love. The places that have not known love. So these are the places within us that, for whatever reason, we really don't want to see, and we don't want anyone else to see either. And therefore, we cannot love. These are the places that have been cut off or split off or exiled, tucked away, hidden, or buried, caused by shaming or regret, trauma, or wounding in a context that would not or could not, for whatever reason, hold our pain in a loving and healing way. These are the places hiding in the corners of our hearts, hoping that we'll stay so busy that we won't notice that they're there. These are the places within us that are heavily fortified, maybe even heavily armed, with big signs, beware, do not enter. These are the places that may not even yet be conscious. So deeply buried they are in shame or trauma, and yet their presence is felt in a weight that simply cannot be lifted no matter what we seem to do. And all those places can get triggered, activated by little things or big things around us. And so we feel their presence even if we cannot or dare not name them out loud. And though the loss of those parts of ourselves is real, and grief for them is legitimate, the very fact that they're so hard to give voice to diminishes their worth, diminishes our worth. As Francis Weller says, we don't grieve for what we don't value. So he puts it like this: whenever any portion of who we are is denied, we live in a condition of loss. The proper response to any loss is grief. But we cannot grieve for something that we feel is outside the circle of worth. That is our predicament. We chronically sense the presence of sorrow, but we are unable to truly grieve because we feel in our body that this piece of who we are is unworthy of grief. Grieving, by its very nature, confirms worth. I am worth crying over. My losses matter. I am worth crying over. My losses matter. You are worth crying over. Your losses matter. If you are in a place where you can speak out loud, or even if you have to do it silently, I invite you to say to yourself 3 times, I am worth crying over. My losses matter. Even if you don't actually believe it, just pretend to. I am worth crying over. My losses matter. What did you notice when you said that to yourself? If you're willing to put that into the chat, just what did you notice? Relief? Coming home? Wanting to believe, but not quite there yet? Sorrow, feeling the losses? Relief and sudden peace? A shift in my solar plexus? Something stirring deep in my core? Tenderness? Did anyone notice any counter messages that came alongside that? Resistance. Remembering people or situations where I felt it, but how they don't have hold on me as much anymore. Vulnerability, denial. Anyone here, oh, please get over yourself? Or, oh, your problems are nothing compared to. Hesitation. Believe I'm worth crying over, but not sure folks see my losses. That old tape, boys, men don't cry. Yeah. It's all there, brings up a lot. Well, every one of those other messages serves to keep that pain locked up inside and only adds layers of shame to whatever the shaming or the trauma or the regret or the wounding caused that original pain to begin with. And therefore, they keep those places that have not known love languishing alone in exile. Now, I do not claim to be an expert on trauma or shame. Lots of amazing work is being done on this, and I am learning right alongside all of you. But I'd like to share a couple of things I've learned about shame from my own life experience, about its power and its consequences that extend far beyond the diminishment of our own life and value. So I've been singing my whole life. At home, in church choirs, school choirs, college choir, semi-professional choirs, and bands. The list is long. And at the same time, I don't know when it started, but my voice has been the most susceptible part of my body to illness. Whenever I got sick, it was always my voice that seemed to be affected, which, as a singer, was maddening, to say the least. Well, one time, I'm going to say about 20 years ago, it was in my first call as a parish pastor. And I had what I would call a shame attack. Anyone know about shame attacks? So I don't even remember what it was, but I did something or I said something that just sent me down the shame spiral. Shame spiral. Not fun, not pretty. But there I was, riddled with shame. And I went to bed, and I woke up the next morning with laryngitis. I could not speak. I had completely lost my voice. No warning signs. I hadn't been feeling sick before then, but suddenly I had lost my voice. And I made the connection. I made the connection between that shame spiral and the loss of my voice. And then I immediately thought, no, really, no, that can't be, can it? But from then on, I started noticing. And I will be damned if there's not a pattern. Whenever I got sick in a way that affected my throat, I thought back, and there was some kind of shame attack not long before. Crazy, right? Or not. So just last summer, the community that I'm serving as interim pastor had a series of what we called courageous conversations. And in one of those conversations, an African-American man and I had a conversation in which we shared with one another and the community about what makes it hard for each of us to talk about race and racism. So we had this conversation on Zoom, like in front of the whole community. And lo and behold, what came up for me? Shame. Shame made it hard for me to talk about race and racism. Shame kept me from using my voice. I didn't actually have laryngitis, but functionally, I did. But here's the thing, we held each other in that conversation. He was kind and courageous enough to have compassion for me. And the community held both of us in courageous love and compassion. And because I was able to say those words, to say that I feel shame, and to bring that shame out of the shadows of my heart, I have been much more courageous and bold in my learning and in my speaking around racism and anti-racism. Shame literally made me use my voice, made me lose my voice, my actual voice, and my ability to express my convictions. But releasing that shame by sharing it in a context of courageous love and compassion freed my voice. And if this past year has taught us anything, it is that silence is complicity, silence is death. And so if shame keeps us silent, then anything we can do to grieve for those shame-ridden places within us and love them back into life is essential for our own healing and for the healing of so much that is broken in our country and in our world. So there is so much more that could be said, that should be said, that needs to be said about the places within us that have not known love. There are many people today, as I said earlier, doing amazing work on healing shame and trauma. Some names are Tara Brach, Brene Brown, Resmaa Menakem. There may be others. If you want to put them in the chat, you're welcome to do that, or send them to Jason and he can share them out as helpful resources around this. But in our limited time together, I will share this one piece. Whether we're talking about shame or regret, trauma or wounding of some other kind, one of the absolute core healing practices that seems to come up everywhere that's talking about shame and trauma is the practice of self-compassion. So today I'd like to invite us into a simple guided practice of self-compassion. So I invite you to turn off your video if you wish, and sit in a comfortable position. Breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth. Slowing your breath with each breath in and each breath out. And after a few breaths, begin holding your breath for 3, 4, 5 seconds between the in-breath and the out-breath. Feeling the tension in your body as you hold your breath. And allowing your body to soften as you release. Each time you come to the out-breath, softening your body just a little more. Softening your face. Softening your neck and shoulders. Softening your arms, your hands. Softening your chest and your belly. Softening your spine. Softening your pelvis and thighs. Softening your knees, your calves, your feet. Just feel the softness of your being. And now just resume a normal breathing pattern in through your nose and out through your mouth. But continue softening so your breath flows smoothly in and smoothly out. And you are softening in and softening out. And now in your heart's imagination, imagine yourself as a small child, snuggled up in a cozy blanket on the soft lap of someone with whom you feel absolutely safe, deeply secure, and unconditionally loved. This may be a real person in your world. It may be an ancestor you never met. It may be an image of God as loving father or mother. It may be Jesus or an angel of light. Whoever it is, just feel yourself held by this loving being who is the embodiment of compassion. There is literally nothing you have done and nothing you could do that could diminish this being's love for you. Allow yourself to curl up and just soak in what this feels like to be held in such deep compassion and love. Allow yourself to feel what it's like to have your whole self, all of who you are, exactly as you are, welcomed and held in this safe, loving embrace. Allow yourself to relax into this embrace, the softness, the strength, this gentle welcome of every part of yourself, every hidden, scary, tender, wounded part of yourself. All of you is welcome here. All of you is loved here. All of you is deeply seen here. Take the next minute And allow this deep love and compassion to soak into every cell of your body. If you want to stay there in that place for the rest of the time, you are welcome. But if you're ready, I invite you now to envision yourself as the being that is holding you. Now you are the one holding yourself with deep compassion and unconditional love. Maybe you're holding your child self, or maybe you want to hold your teen self, or your young adult self, or even your grown adult self. No matter what self you are holding, feel the softness of your heart, the tenderness in your eyes, the gentle rocking strength with which you hold yourself in compassion. Tell the self that you are holding that all of you is welcome here. Every last hidden part is welcome, loved, and wanted here. Tell the self you are holding, you are worth crying over. Your losses matter. Now take another minute and just hold yourself in that place. And if any of those places that have not known love emerge in feelings or memories, simply welcome them home with kindness and compassion. Thank them for the courage it took to reveal themselves to you. And allow them to move through you, continuing to hold yourself in that soft, strong, tender embrace of unconditional love and compassion. And coming back to the breath, soft breath in and soft breath out. Remember that you just held yourself in deep compassion. Remember that you just allowed yourself to be held by love. Remember that you can come back to this practice of self-compassion at any moment. It is as close as your next breath. And when you are ready, you're welcome to open your eyes and come back to this space. So friends, in just a moment, Jason is going to be inviting us into breakout rooms, and he will share the questions for reflection in the chat or to broadcast in the rooms. But just to let you know what those are, the questions are: what did you notice about this guided self-compassion practice? How does your shame negatively impact your life or the lives of others? How could you imagine incorporating into your life greater compassion with yourself and with others? And what is your next faithful step?
Welcome back, everybody. Hope you had a blessed conversation. And as is our habit, we like to unpack. And I know, Solveig, you're going to help us. Ella asked permission to read a poem that she felt kind of ties a nice bow on the conversation that happened in her small group. So Ella, and then Solveig, to you.
And it's Ela, just for your information. Ela. Yeah. And so I was just saying to my small group and then accidentally pushed the wrong button and exited out of it. We were talking about the words we use when you talk about guilt and shame. or how you help your congregation not feel shame when you talk about things like white supremacy or just not getting enough members as they'd like to have. And so I was referencing a communication from Bishop Eaton, which, and I think the best way for me to just talk about this is to read this little poem I wrote. So if you don't mind, I will just read it and see what you get out of it. All right. The bishop's letter speaks with boldness. She asks for us to embrace. It speaks with boldness. She asks for us to embrace. Christ saves us from our own evils. Today's truths have been named twice: systemic racism, religious nationalism, white supremacy. In rural valleys and villages, these words fall deaf on ears that have not shared in their grappling. They do not know that darkness pulled up from blindness, deeply rooted, will not bloom, but only crackle dry in wintered limbs, until they too can no longer reach for the sky, but fall like spires toppled to the earth they could not share. So sometimes people, when they hear a poem once, want to know what it means. And I say, you're not supposed to explain that if it's a poem, but I'm going to anyway. It was a way for me to, in a way, uplift my guilt that I have a difficulty saying words like white supremacy and religious nationalism and Black Lives Matter in a rural congregation, because they haven't had the opportunity to grapple with it. They haven't been in a situation where they've been able to perhaps come with words they would use to describe it for themselves. And yet, if we as pastors allow that kind of continued blindness and non-opportunities for grappling with that, that will cause us to fall in a way to the earth that we have been given to share but are unable to. And I think that's one way to look at this for congregations and for ourselves, is that's what it really gets down to, is difficulty of just sharing the world we're in. And that may also cause the church to topple. So
yeah. Thank you for that, Ela. Really grateful for you making those connections. That's so important. This is all about making connections. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
There's one piece that I do want to just make sure to name before we close. And that is that when we create, or when we find compassionate space to allow these places that have not known love to reveal themselves and come out of hiding, if you will, initially you might have an experience of relief, of liberation even, and because these places have been in hiding for so long, some people often then experience what has been called backdraft. So backdraft can happen when we invite these places of shame or trauma into the light for healing, but then they bring with them a whole bunch more difficult feelings and maybe a whole bunch more difficult memories. And so it can feel overwhelming, that backdraft. It doesn't always happen, but it can. So I wanted you to just be aware of that, even in the next hours or days. And there's another thing that can also happen when things come up. And I don't know if other people call it this, but I call it a vulnerability hangover. And when I'm willing to be vulnerable, to look at a part of myself or to share that with somebody else, and then afterwards I kind of go, why did I do that? Why did I do that? And And either way, with the vulnerability hangover, with backdraft, the guidance of teachers in this practice remains the same. Self-compassion. Keep practicing self-compassion to hold all those tender places in love.
Solveig, thank you for that beautiful wrap up. I love the things that you've named, and it reminds me that we need to consistently be sharing with all of you about the resource that we have available, and that is our beautiful realm of ELCA coaches. We have several coaches now that have trained, and they have certificates in grief coaching. We have a very large cohort that's training right now. We stand ready to walk with you or other leaders that you know of that need a conversation partner around things like this. So don't be afraid to reach out. You can always connect with Jason or I through our website. So friends, thank you again for being with us. Solveig, another beautiful ritual, an important topic, as Melissa just wrote, that practicing this with ourselves helps us create that space for others. And imagine a world where we are holding that space for one another to grieve and to mourn properly these things, that have not felt worthy, that have felt shame. Yeah. So thank you, friends. Tammy will be staying on to be with any of us that want to participate in the after conversation. Please join us again next week. We have the privilege of hosting Asia Martinez. She is a professor at Northern Texas University. She has written a book on critical race theory and rhetoric, and this is a part of our commitment to dismantling institutional racism. And she just brings a unique lens to this topic. And so I hope that you join us. So friends, God bless you. Keep doing the good work that God has created you to do uniquely in the kingdom. Thanks, Solveig. Thanks, friends.